Out now on Blu-ray from Epic Pictures is the new horror anthology Satanic Hispanics, which has a great ring to it. This is 5 Latin American directors doing horror anthology films. So the framing device here, I'll tell you who did them. As we go, I'll tell you who did them. The framing device here is police bust into like a warehouse or something, find all these people dead and chained up. One man is surviving, desperate to get out of the place, says, "You got to let me go, you got to let me go." They take him back to the precinct, and 2 officers start questioning him. So the framing device is this one lone survivor being questioned. That lone survivor is played by Efren Ramirez, who most people probably know as Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite. But there's no laughing here. Actually, there is a lot of laughing throughout this, but not in that segment, per se. So he's being questioned, and he is referred to as the Traveler, and he basically says, "Something evil is coming for me. You got to let me out of here, or everybody here is going to die. You got to let me go." And they start questioning him, and throughout the questioning, he says, "Well, let me tell you about this guy." And then you get the little stories that are throughout. So probably the 2 most recognizable people in the film are Ramirez and Grunberg, who people would probably remember most from Heroes, I guess, as playing one of the cops. The directors here, as I said, I'll go through 112 minutes, breezed right along. This was, if I may give this away, this was really, really good. Like, a lot of times I don't keep my review discs, I give them to friends or whatever. This was one that I watched and I'm like, I think I want to watch this movie again in the future. This is a keeper for me. So presented in 5.1 surround or stereo 2.0, English SDH subtitles, Spanish SDH subtitles, Spanish, Dutch, French subtitles. The film is almost entirely in English. There are some short bits and pieces here and there that are in Spanish, and those are subtitled, but if you're somebody who's just like, I don't want to read, don't worry about it. It's mostly in English. So chapter 1 is The Traveler, directed by Mike Mendez, and that is the framing story. So Mike Mendez, everybody else gets their segments here and there. Mike Mendez is sprinkled throughout. So that's the story of this guy who's being questioned. Chapter 2, this is how they appear on screen. Tambien lo vi, directed by Demián Rugna. This is the man who gave us When Evil Lurks, which was one of the best films I saw this year in terms of horror. Probably the best horror film I saw this year. Basically, it's a depressed guy who's living alone in his grandmother's house, and he plays with Rubik's Cubes a lot and likes puzzles, and he determined that he can do this weird thing in a hallway where he does hand gestures and flicks lights on and off, and he sees something. So he brings somebody, a paranormal investigator, to his house to see if that person sees something, and that person does see something, and that leads to something very creepy and very disturbing and wildly effective. So out of the gate, first chapter, I was like, wow, this is really creepy, and not a lot of horror does that to me anymore. It ends a little abruptly to me, and I was a little confused. I'm like, "What?" But ultimately, it's really, really good. And as I said, this is a film I'm probably going to watch again. So upon repeat viewings, the part where I went, "What?" may make a little bit more sense. So chapter 3, El Vampiro by Eduardo Sánchez. Eduardo Sánchez is the man who gave us half of the team who gave us Blair Witch Project way back when. That is basically, it's a comedic tale about a vampire in the big city who doesn't realize it's daylight savings time and he has less time to get home than he thought he did. So it's a vampire running from the daylight, basically. Chapter 4 is Nahuales from, I probably mispronounced that, and I'm probably going to mispronounce names here too, so my apologies in advance, by Gigi, Saul, Guerrero. That is basically a Mexican shapeshifter tale. Probably the most straight-ahead serious film in this serious chapter in this whole film, and really, really well done, really creepy, and really takes you into a culture you probably don't know, about a legend you probably don't know, and that lack of orientation, I think, makes it even scarier. Chapter 5, The Hammer of Zanzibar by Alejandro Brugués, or Brugués. In one of the extras, he corrects somebody's pronunciation of his last name. I don't remember what the correct one was. A comedic man versus demon story, and it's very Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. It's really funny. It's crude and it's really funny. I don't want to say any more than that, but it's fun. It's very light, and it's very Evil Dead. It's very much like a battle with like a bit of a flashback in it, but I was laughing out loud watching it. And like I say, not many horror movies scare me, and not a lot of comedy these days makes me laugh out loud. So mega points for this. The whole thing is really nicely shot, really well performed. Going into this, I was a little bit not afraid. I presumed this was probably going to be kind of cheap with, kind of not so great acting and not so whatever, because I hadn't really heard of it. This thing is top notch. Like, this is really well done. With the budgets they had, it's all on the screen, as they say. Special features, you get a commentary with the directors, with the producer, or the producers and some of the directors, not all. You get something called Dread Talk, which is a Zoom chat with some people from Dread Central website, 2 writers from Dread Central, and all but one of the directors, and that's a lot of fun. That's like hangout. It's like hanging out with friends, in that it's so casual, you feel like you're part of this friend group, but also you can clearly see that they're all friends and enjoy each other's company and enjoy making fun of each other and all that. So that really gets into the nitty-gritty of all of the segments of the film, but the broader scope, Latino horror, Latin American horror, classics that they love, all kinds of stuff like that. So that was a really cool chat. And that was 36 minutes. You get segment posters, and that's just a click-through still sequence. Basically, it's modifications of the main movie poster with an image from each of the segments and those segment titles and directors on that. That was interesting. You get the trailer that's 2 minutes, and then you get Dread trailers, which are trailers from other Dread Central produced or backed films, and those are for The Jester, Island Escape, Last Night at Terrace Lanes, and Colonials. This movie is really good. So many horror movies come out that are not that great, and I always say, as a horror fan, it's like you're chasing that thrill. You're watching so many movies that are just not good because eventually you're going to hit another good one. I don't know too many other fan bases that would willingly watch so much stuff that's not great because they just like the genre, you like the trappings of the genre. You wouldn't watch tons and tons and tons of comedies if only like 1 in 10 comedies made you laugh, I don't think. But we do that with horror movies. I say all that to say this. I didn't expect much of Satanic Hispanics because I just didn't really know much about it. And wow, this was a great surprise. This is probably one of the better horror films I've seen this year. It's so much fun. It's when it wants to be, it's the perfect horror comedy, in that when it wants to be scary, it is scary, and when it wants to be funny, it is funny, and not a lot can pull that off. So available now, probably streaming. I watched it on Blu-ray from Epic Pictures, Satanic Hispanics.